If any of you were customers with my partners over at DraftKings and you came to me, if you came to me, which I would hate if you did that puts that puts a ton of pressure on me. But let's just say you did. I still wouldn't blow you off. I wouldn't say I can't answer that question. It puts too much pressure on me. I would answer your question. I would tell you what I believe the best bet is. I believe the best bet of this entire card is a prop bet that says Dominick Reyes versus Anthony Smith does not go to the distance. Now, Anthony is dealing with something. We haven't talked about it, and it is not our place to discuss it, but he's dealing with it right now, and it greatly pertains to this week. When we were in New York, so 3 weeks ago, Anthony lost his jiu-jitsu coach. Great guy, the epitome of health. Been there for Anthony's entire career, 53 years old. Husband, father of 2. Went to sleep, never got up. So, what do you do? I mean, what do you do if you're Anthony? He got on an airplane. He went right home. They start making arrangements. But he's got this fight coming up. A fight that was at the time only 3 weeks away, and at this time is only 3 days away. What do you do? And that question, of course, came up very, very quickly. And it was never even a consideration to do anything different than to go through with the plan. All right. The plan wasn't the world's greatest one to start with. The plan was to go put a mouthpiece on with some really small gloves and step into a cage against Dominick Reyes. The only guy that's ever beaten Jon Jones. So, all right. Who's closer, by the way? That'd be a fun trivia game. Who was closer to beating Jon? Reyes, who beat him, and the judges turned it in wrong, or Anthony Smith, who just had to use one word to beat him? They asked Anthony a question, and Anthony said no. And that is what allowed that fight to continue. Had that one word been yes, they would have stopped the fight by disqualification, and Anthony would have been the champion of the world. It's very interesting in that regard. These are the two guys that were the closest, realistically, to beating Jon Jones from a realistic standpoint. All right. So, that's aside from me tearing his toe off in horror and throwing it into the crowd. Present company excluded, right? So, I was at the Sphere, watching the Sphere card. And I'm watching it with Gilbert Melendez. We're sitting in there. And this big guy came up, man. This guy was beautiful. He comes up and he introduces his wife, who was even more beautiful, and he says hello, and I'm shaking hands, and the dude looks just like Dominick Reyes. I can't figure out who it is. It's not Dominick Reyes, but it looks just like him. Like maybe it's Dominick's brother. Maybe Dominick's got a twin brother, something like this. And the only reason I know it's not Dominick Reyes is this dude that I'm speaking about, introducing me to his beautiful wife, is 6'4" and 240 pounds. It just simply couldn't be Dominick Reyes. So we have a nice exchange, and the guy goes and sits down, and I said to Gilbert, I said, hey man, did you see that guy? He looks just like Dominick Reyes. I said, who is that? Gilbert looks over, he says, that's Dominick Reyes. I said, Dominick Reyes is 240 pounds? And Gilbert's like, yeah, apparently. He looked great, too. He was all strong and buff. And you guys might have seen a photo going around, but it was Dominick Reyes and it was Alex Pereira. And the photo was used, a side-by-side. It looked like they just got done training. It was a side-by-side, but it was used as an illustration to show us how big Pereira is. Wow, that picture sure did its job. So, Dominick and Anthony, I mean, that is a bludgeoning for the ages. I have no idea precisely why, aside from a bludgeoning, we're putting these two monsters in there together. And I only bring up that the very tragic story of Anthony's coach, who has been with him through everything. It's his jiu-jitsu coach has been there from the beginning. I only bring that up because what would you do? And there's many things in life where you'll say, well, if I'd have been there, I'd have, right? Guy comes in and he's robbing a restaurant in front of you. You sit there and cower, put your wallet out, I'm going to go out and confront him. Like, you think you're a certain kind of guy. Everybody has an answer for these things. They think they're a certain kind of guy. And the reality is they will never be in that situation. So it all really comes down to the kind of guy you think you are or you think you would be. This is a wildly difficult situation. Jake Shields went through one. He was a heavy favorite over his opponent was Jake Ellenberger at the time, and Jake lost his father, and it was the week of the fight, and Jake stayed the course. That's what my dad would have wanted me to do. And it was one of the big upsets of 170 pounds. 170 pounds at that time was very clearly George St. Pierre, number 1, Jake Shields, number 2. There was a gap between those two. And Ellenberger wins this fight. And I don't want to take that glorious moment from Ellenberger. But I'm trying to tell you what happened. We've seen these things, and they're tough. The emotion that goes into fighting, the emotion that you've really got to have on your side. It was a really incredible thing. Paddy the Baddy lost somebody and then had to go into a fight, and we never heard about it. He never mentioned, never used an excuse, but when the fight was over, he paid a RIP to this fallen friend. And it was really a remarkable thing to understand that Paddy could compartmentalize it to this regard. It was a very incredible thing. And if anybody can overcome, it will be Lionheart. If anybody can use that and go out and get a victory, but use that as part of their motivation, it is Lionheart. And great things have happened. The night Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson, he said it was for his mom. So it's one of these spots, man. It's a wildly difficult position. And does it have anything to do with the fight? The way the story will be told when this fight is over, no. No, they were two separate things. But the reality is, yes, it has a lot to do with the fight. It's very heavy on his mind. It's heavy on his mind at all times. He doesn't know. He doesn't know himself if that's going to serve as a motivation. He doesn't know. No one does. And that largely is where the word fighter comes from. Can you overcome these things or not? Did you read the fairy tale when you were a kid and you think you're supposed to get swept off your feet and everything is supposed to be great? Well, if you'll read the fairy tale again, that only happens to the girl. Nothing great is supposed to happen to the guy. The guy's got to endure, be strong, and go forward. But when you really get put in that spot, it's a unique situation. Anthony is definitely heavy on my mind. I'm not going to give you a prediction for the outcome. But if somebody was to come to me and say, what is the bad? Good, bad, up, down, sideways. That fight is not going 3 rounds.